Welcome back to Balcostics Ed. This week we are discussing why Jamaican boys underperform in school compared to girls. To speak on this topic, we have with us an educator, Shari-Lee Carter, who will share her research findings with us today. So just a little about Shari. Shari is a Jamaican educator who is currently teaching English as a secondary language at the elementary to tertiary level in Japan. So we're checking in with her from Japan today. Shari is also pursuing a Master of Arts in Arts degree in International Education with a specification in Innovation and Reform from the University of Leicester. So without further delay, let's get to it. Welcome, Shari.
Thanks for having me.
Good. All right, so Shari, we're looking at your topic today in terms of why Jamaican boys underperform in school compared to girls. What was the impetus behind, doing this research? How the idea came about? Could you just explain that to us?
Yeah, man, sure. So outside of the fact that conducting a small scale research was a requirement for one of the courses that I was doing at the time, I chose this particular topic because of three main reasons that basically were combined into a passion project of mine, kind of. So the first reason was, at the time, a lot of conversations and a lot of discussions were happening surrounding the Jamaican education system, the weaknesses in the Jamaican education system. A lot of the discussions were in the print media and on social media, and a lot of persons were giving their input on this. Secondly, I found that a lot of these think pieces and opinions weren't necessarily based or rooted in data, but they were basically about anecdotal evidence and emotions, kinda, And I really didn't like the fact that it wasn't research based, even though these are very important for persons to talk about their opinions and personal experiences. But when you're on the outside of the education system, a lot of times the opinions aren't necessarily balanced. So that is another reason why I did that. And finally, I found that there weren't a lot of teachers chiming in on this topic. I don't know if it was a case of not having access to the print media or them just being apathetic to the whole conversation, a deeds not words kind of vibe.
Yes.
But yeah, all of those kind of combined, and it's sort of manifested into a passion project of mine. So yeah, that's why I chose this particular topic.
Okay, good. Because this topic is very, very interesting, and this is something that many of us have thought about and wonder, why is it that? Because I think quite a number of Jamaicans are aware that, typically in high school and that type of thing, the girls, you have more girls doing better than boys. But you're right.
That is true.
It's a lot of anecdotal evidence rather than.
Yeah, man.
Yes. Okay. So in terms of your approach, yes. So in terms of your approach, could you explain to us in terms of how you went about, in terms of your methodology and that type of thing?
So I had to get permission from the schools involved. So I got permission from University of Leceister and the school where I conducted the study in Jamaica. So I had to get permission from the gatekeepers. Okay. So after doing that, I had to basically conduct a review of the literature that was already there on boys' achievements.
And in terms of that literature, you found stuff that was Jamaican based as well.
Yeah, man. A lot of the things that I used were basically, well, not a lot. Some of the information that I used were Jamaican based, of course, and were a part of the discussion that was going on at the time. Okay. Additionally, I had to use, of course, academic literature and some scholarly articles. So I had to find the gaps in some of the researches, the strengths and the weaknesses, you know, what it is that they did as opposed to what it is that I can do, what new information I can find out, and all of those things. So that's what I did. And then after doing that, I had to create some data collection tools. So it was basically a mixed methodology research. So I used questionnaires and a semi-structured interviews actually.
Okay.
To find information.
Quantitative and qualitative methods.
Quantitative and qualitative methods, definitely,
Good.
to collect data. And after doing that, I had to pilot these tools before actually doing the research to kind of see, you know, to see
Yes.
what are some of the errors and the weaknesses and to tighten up on all of those things.
Good.
And after doing that, then I actually collected data from the respondents.
Okay.
Yeah, man, that's basically it.
Good. Well sound. And I like the wholesome approach, because it's both looking at the quantitative side and the qualitative side, which will always give you a better picture.
Definitely.
Excuse me. Yeah. All right. So in terms of approach, you know, every approach has difficulties, challenges, issues. So could you just highlight some of these challenges or issues that came up in terms of your approach?
Issues that came up. So definitely the fact that I am in Japan conducting research about a school in Jamaica. That was a big issue. Especially since the time difference, there's such a big time difference between the two countries. So I have to be scheduling telephone interviews, ensuring that the time line up with everybody's schedule and all of those things. So that's one. I definitely had to rely on electronic software to use in order to collect data.
Gotcha.
So because I had to rely on that, then there were issues of ethics and privacy and people not wanting the software to collect their email addresses and IP addresses and all of that. So I had to ensure that the software that I chose was okay for everybody and okay with everybody's, you know, what everybody wanted. So that was an issue. Also, I find that it is very difficult to get peer-reviewed journal articles on Jamaica's education system through the internet. So unless you are able to get into a car and reach down UE and UTech, NCU probably, you won't be getting a lot of recent research or recent information on Jamaica's education system. And that was a huge drawback to some of that was a limitation.
I guess they have it on their own system, so you have to be on their system to pull certain articles.
Definitely. Exactly. So I found myself trying to scramble to see who is at UE, you know, who can find this article for me, and so on, so on. So yeah, so that was an issue that I had. I think those were the issues that I found. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I think because especially when you're using online methods to collect. So in terms of the quantitative, I think you mentioned following up with persons via telephone calls and different. That's a good way just to remind them, because most times these online, they have lower response rate. But to get rid of that challenge, one of the methods is to do these follow-up calls and to actually call persons personally to say, okay, I send you an email. So with a question, yes, because if you don't do that, you won't get a lot of responses. So
exactly. And I was fortunate enough to have somewhat of a relationship with some of the respondents.
Good.
So in addition to using those persons who I already knew, I was able to convince them to get more persons involved. So there was a bit of snowballing sampling going on there to get as many people as I can, you know, to capture as much data.
Good. Good. All right. Sounds good. All right. So we're going to get into the meat of the matter now. So you know, after doing all of this and gathering your data, it's all about the findings, and so explain to us, you know, these findings. I think we have three main findings that you found.
Mhm.
What if anything surprised you after, you know, after you go through these findings? But go through the findings. Let we see.
Yeah, man. So three main findings. First, I think before we get to the curriculum does not appeal to boys. So first, before that, teachers had indicated that they feel that boys and their idea of masculinity, it doesn't coincide with excelling in education. So they don't feel that being a straight A student or being an achiever is something that is in line with being a Jamaican male, right? So that's what teachers are saying.
Okay.
And so boys are not motivated to want to excel because of that. So that's one reason. And no, the curriculum does not appeal to boys, and it doesn't necessarily appeal or suit their developmental needs. This is something that a lot of teachers were saying. And the danger in this is that this idea of appealing to boys and appealing to boys, the masculinity of boys, is a bit of a limiting factor, because the construct of masculinity may inform the learning potential of the student. So a teacher may look on a student and say, boy, I don't think you can manage this, or I don't think this content is suitable for you. And so what happens is what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy in education, where because the teacher feels that this may happen, you will eventually find that the student confirms this expectation. As false and as erroneous as this expectation is, eventually you will find that the child confirms it because the teacher felt this way initially. So that's one thing that I found that may have contributed to the underachievement of boys.
Yes, and just to reiterate, if we didn't make it very clear that this is a teacher's perspective in terms of the research, yes. So
Thank you.
that's a reference as it relates to teachers. So we're looking at teachers viewpoints.
Of course.
Yes. So the second point.
Right. More boys being disciplined. So teachers agreed that the number of persons or the students, hold on, let me ensure that I'm saying the correct thing.
Okay.
All right, so teachers believe that majority of the students disciplined for extremely violent behaviors and violation of dress code are boys. Like majority of the students being disciplined for those things are boys. The policy as it relates to violation of dress code, extremely violent behaviors, etc., for this particular school in this particular context, the policy is suspension. The boys or the students will be suspended, and in very, very extreme cases, the student may be expelled from the institution. With that being said, it would follow that if there are more boys being disciplined, then more boys will be losing a lot of teacher contact time.
Yes, teaching time.
Right. So, and that is very important if it is that we want boys to be achievers. So
yes, it's true. I mean, that definitely. Once you pass through, I went to a technical school in you know,
technical school.
Yes.
Which technical school did you go to?
I went to Homewood Technical.
Oh, okay. Sister school too. My technical school, yeah.
So I know that what you're saying is actually reality in terms of you know, boys, mostly boys that especially dress code. We now, you know, a lot of boys wear the white t-shirt under the uniform.
Under the uniform. Right.
Something else. So, and I guess these things add up, because if you have more boys being disciplined or being expelled or suspended for these things over time, it definitely play a role in terms of boys and the performance. Yeah. So
of course.
I think Yeah, moving to the final main findings now.
Yeah. The same principle applies here, more boys being involved in extracurricular activities. I believe it was last year. I think it was last year when there was something in the media about boys who are underachievers who are being roped into the representation for their schools. So when boys are missing class contact time or teaching contact time to play games or to participate in extracurricular activities, then of course it doesn't necessarily remedy the issue. It kind of exacerbates, the
Exactly.
whole underachievement rates.
People playing football, they playing cricket. We have a lot of you have track and field, and most times these activities is definitely biased towards boys. So you normally have more boys. I don't think a lot of schools even have a female football team. Is more is
Exactly.
yeah, and you have
Yes.
football team for basically every age group of males. You have an under 13, probably an under 14, under 15, under
Right,
16.
right,
Same thing for
definitely.
cricket. So these are some of the things based on the findings that affect performance as well. Which naturally, and as I say, this kind of ties into the previous point in terms of just less contact time with teachers. Yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
good. So in terms of how these findings now could inform education policy, I think you had mentioned something earlier, just in passing about the education system and the approach, with anecdotes. But now that we have some former findings and analysis, what is your take on possible policy?
Yeah, man. But before I go into that, I think I need to reiterate that the research is specific to this context.
Yes.
And particularly, one of the things that I found was that within this school, a lot of the teachers indicated that the boys were mostly, or the students generally, were from a low to mid socioeconomic status background.
Yes.
Right. So in terms of generalization, we have to be kind of careful of how we generalize the findings and stuff.
Yes.
But in terms of how policymakers can use these findings or how this can inform education policy, I think we can see whether it is possible that the situation surrounding these findings are applicable. We can see where these situations surrounding these findings are applicable to whatever context it is. So say, for example, you are an administrator at a school, a discipline or principal. You can use these findings and see what policies may be applied to your local context. And from there, you can conduct a research to see if any bias exists with some of the policies or with the way some of your policies affect change in your institution. At the level of the Ministry of Education or on a national level, I think it's very important that our decisions are informed by data.
Yes.
So I think it's very important for the Ministry of Education to look at something like this on a wider scale. So they may use the findings from this research, look at the gaps in information, look at the weaknesses, look at the strengths, and perhaps build on that idea and go into research that is tailored to the different local contexts in Jamaica, because of course, not all schools have the same makeup, not all schools are of, the same generalizations and stuff. So I think they can use this to inform some of the decisions that they have made or that they are trying to make. That's one. Regular audits need to be carried out in schools, and some of the policies that exist in some of these schools, I think the principals and perhaps senior teachers need to do an audit on some of these policies and practices as well.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a student, and perhaps it has changed because a long time ago. But I remember when I was a student and looking back, and I'm like, but some of these things, aren't necessarily informed by data.
Yeah.
You know, hindsight is 2020, and I'm like, why is it that I did that? There was absolutely no reason as to why I did some of the things I did back when I was a student, you know. So I think it's very important, and if we are serious about increasing the efficiency of education, increasing its effectiveness, and ensuring that our students are able to compete on a global level, then I believe a lot of the decisions that we make ought to be informed by data,
yes,
and not just opinions and emotions and anecdotes, you know?
Definitely.
So I think that's how it's valid and relevant.
Okay. All right, good. So let's and again you had touched on this in terms of future research. What areas based on you mentioned previously that in terms of context, it's certain socioeconomic, and in terms of the type of school, it's a certain socioeconomic background that this school would fall into.
Right.
So in terms of future research, what would you recommend for researchers who might want to investigate more into this area?
I think future researchers can look into the interplay between gender and education in Jamaica. A lot of how we educate students has to do with how students are socialized, and I guess a lot of the learning outcomes the learning outcomes have a lot to do with how students are socialized and their construct of masculinity or their construct of femininity. So I think it's important for future researchers to look into that area. There is also, oh yes, the notion of underachievement. I wrote it down here. Okay. So underachievement, when we spoke about, when I was investigating underachievement, I used the policy of the school that stated that students who performed below a particular average were considered underachievers. The word underachievement has, I think, a wider scope than just looking at performance data. So future researchers could focus a lot on a holistic view of underachievement and not just necessarily focus on performance data. Okay. So I think that's one way future research.
And performance data here meaning that like average grades, right? Like average.
Exactly. Average grades having to do with standardized test scores and all of those things.
Okay, good. All right, thanks so much, Shari.
No problem.
For making the time after 12 or after 11 in Japan now. We really appreciate you taking the time and, as I said, making the time to come and share these findings with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me, man. No problem.
Definitely.